it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I have read recently that I rated 4 stars or higher. So obviously I'm doing this recent reads video a little bit different than I usually do them. What happened was in May, I ended up just reading a lot. Like, it was kind of the end of April and then May, I ended up reading way more than I usually do. And because of that, keeping up with the recent reads video just like wasn't possible. So I decided to divide it a little bit differently than I usually do. So in order to kind of get caught up a little bit, which basically I don't know what's gonna happen if I keep reading at this rate with my recent reads videos. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'll be able to like keep on top of it a little bit better, but as of now, that wasn't happening. So instead of doing it by date when I read the books, I decided to try and divide it by rating. I thought that might be kind of fun. So obviously this video is going to be the more positive and upbeat one, and then the other one that I do is going to be books that I rated below 4 stars. So there's like, I think the lowest rated on there is probably like a 1.5 or something, but that doesn't happen very often. But there's a lot of books on there that are also like 3.5 and 3.75. But today I just decided to focus on my 4 to 5 star reads. I felt like that was kind of a good way to divide it. For 4 and 5 star reads, these are books that like I absolutely would recommend. I thought were really great and I enjoyed them and pretty much fell in love with them. So I don't know if I should like rate up to 5 stars or just start with the 5-star ones. I guess I'm just gonna start with the 5-star ones. I feel like I'll like rate down in the other ones, but if you want me next time, if I do it this way, if you want me to do it this way more often, please do let me know. But if you want me to like go from the 4-star to the 5-star, let me know as well. Anyways, also I wanted to mention, if you were interested in hearing about one book in particular, I will have the timestamps linked in the description down below, so you can just skip straight to that book to hear my thoughts. And now we will actually get right into it. The first book that I gave a 5 out of 5 stars was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. It's really kind of no surprise that I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because over the course of reading her books, I've discovered that I really love her voice as an author. She has amazing writing, and I've read The Poet X, and then last year I read With the Fire on High, and The Poet X was a novel in verse, and this one is also a novel in verse, but With the Fire on High it wasn't. So I feel like I've been really into novels in verse recently. I'm not really sure why, but I listened to the audiobook for this one because I did the same with The Poet X, because Elizabeth Acevedo is a slam poet. So she has such a way of reading her poetry that it totally immerses you in the story, and this one was no exception, although it did have dual narrators because it follows 2 characters. So we have Camino and Yahara, and they both have the same father, so they're sisters, but they don't know of each other's existence. They don't discover one another until their father dies, and he actually dies on a flight because one of them, Camino, lives in the Dominican Republic and Yahara lives in New York City. So when Camino arrives at the airport to pick him up for the summer where he's supposed to visit her, she finds crying people instead, and she discovers that this tragedy has happened, and it actually is based on a real flight. American Airlines Flight 587 crashed shortly after, it was a couple of months after 9/11, and once it was discovered that it wasn't a terrorist attack, everyone kind of forgot about it, but it was a huge loss for the Dominican community. 260 passengers died, and the majority of them were Dominican. I didn't know about this at all, and I'm really glad that this novel brought that to my attention, and I feel like it just really wrapped the story around that. The dual narrators, the author and the other narrator, really brought the verse to life and made it such an immersive listening experience where I picked it up and I didn't stop listening to it until I actually finished the audiobook. I came to care for these characters so much in a very short period of time. Both girls, I just wanted to like hug and care for them. It was a really sad and heavy and emotional story, and it definitely deals with grief as a central topic and the loss of a parent and trying to cope with that. And also the discovery of one another is obviously something that's hard for them because it's a secret that their father was harboring. So while he's left, they've also discovered that he's left them with much more than they were expecting. And it was emotional and intense in a lot more ways than I had initially anticipated. In particular, in Camino's storyline, there were a lot of things that happened that I wasn't expecting and just had me like completely on the edge of my seat my entire time, and I wanted to just protect both of these characters so fiercely. Although they weren't really characters that like needed that, but because they had been through so much, I just wanted the best for them. Each of the girls' stories kind of mirrored each other in interesting ways, and you saw how their lives were so different, but how they came together as well. And even though they discovered that their father was living a double life, he's still like, they had such love for him, and he was a presence in this book. The grief was so heavy that you knew that he had been there for both of his daughters, despite what might have like all his secrets that he was keeping. It's kind of like that moment where you find out that your parents aren't as perfect as you think they are, and that's definitely hard when it's dealing with the loss of a parent that you can't even really talk to about that. Yahara and her girlfriend Dre also had a really beautiful relationship, and I loved the families that came to it as well. I loved seeing Camino's family, and just everything about it felt so authentic. These characters felt very real, that it was one of those experiences where I closed the book and I was like, what are they doing now? And I feel like that's kind of the second time that that's happened recently. There's another book that I'll talk about in this video that I also had that experience with, but it's a very interesting experience whenever that happens to me. But I think that this is a story that will resonate with a lot of people who have lost a parent and have dealt with that sort of grief. I think it's going to be a really impactful story for a lot of reasons, and I didn't really know what to expect from it, to be honest. I just kind of pre-ordered it because I was like, I've loved everything else she's written, so I'll probably like this one as well. And I will say that left me kind of confused in the beginning because I didn't know at first that it was I knew it was two separate girls that we were dealing with, but I didn't know that it was I thought it might be two separate fathers that we were dealing with. So once I understood that it was the same father, it all started to click. Like, I read the synopsis and it was like, okay, I understand what's going on here. But it just was such a beautiful story overall, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely would recommend listening to the audiobook if you're able, or just reading the verse, because it is so lovely and she just has such a way with words. Like, there were portions where it was the two of them and they were in conversation, and it just like, I can't even explain the listening experience, but it just felt so real. I feel like these were real characters, and I love that. Next is Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian. So I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, by the way. I'll just start off by saying that. But this is set in 1989 in New York City at the height of the AIDS crisis. So we follow 3 teenagers. Reza is an Iranian boy who has come to live in New York City, and he is dealing with a lot of things because he's gay, and he knows he's gay, but he's also terrified of it because everywhere there are images of these gay men that are dying of AIDS, so he's living in fear. We also have Judy, who is an aspiring fashion designer who worships her uncle Steven, who is a gay man that has AIDS and is using his time to work as an activist as part of ACT UP. Now, Judy's best friend Art is also really close with Uncle Steven because Art is the only out and proud gay teen at their high school, and he is rebelling against his conservative parents who don't accept him by photographing the AIDS crisis. So Reza meets Art and Judy and Reza start dating because Judy starts falling for Reza, and he just kind of goes for it. But obviously, that's going to complicate things a lot. I think this was a very important read. It educated me on a lot of queer history that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know a lot about what happened in the AIDS crisis, but it made me want to research some more and find out more about that time period that is in pretty recent history. I think learning about that part of queer history, and especially the activism that was a part of it, which I didn't realize, I didn't really know about ACT UP. I was completely ignorant about that, but I'm glad that this book taught me more and made me look more into it. This also did a really good job of encapsulating what it was like to be a gay man during the AIDS crisis and living in such fear, because Reza in particular is a character that's terrified because of all that he's seeing. He is obviously questioning his identity and wondering if there's something wrong with him because that's kind of what the media is putting out there. So he's afraid. And it's such a heartbreaking and heavy story because it's just awful that he is living in fear of being who he truly is. And it's a beautiful story at the same time, because over the course of the book you see him develop as a character and see Art and Judy develop as characters as well. But I think the main character that I really felt like carried things was Uncle Stephen. He acted as a mentor for all of the characters really, and kind of a guiding force for them along the way. And I think without him, the book would have been a lot less successful for me. He kind of drove home the message of this book, which the book is basically celebrating love, but in all its forms. It's celebrating romantic love between whoever, it's celebrating platonic love, it's celebrating familial love, and I thought that it did a really great job of that. There obviously was a lot of tangled drama going on between Art and Reza and Judy, and that was kind of like painful to read, because I just like, I wanted it, I was like, no, like communication, but I also understood why it was happening, so it didn't take away from my enjoyment. An interesting part of this story is that it deals with self-expression and learning to express yourself really, and Madonna came up a lot. Madonna was a main part of the story, and I haven't really given two thoughts to Madonna. Like I don't not like her, but I don't like also like her. Like I'm very neutral basically. I'm not like super into music or anything like that, so I've just never really thought about that. But it was such an interesting perspective to see what she had done for so many people at that time, and how important she was to a character like Reza, and how much of an impact she had. But I feel like this book kind of taught me the history that I wasn't taught in school, and I feel like it should be history that's taught in school. This queer history is something that you have to really seek out and learn yourself, and I think it is important that you know about it. It is queer history, but it's also just a part of our history in general. In history, like history lessons just give you such like a narrow view of things that I wish that more recent history was talked about a little bit more. But this was really a coming of age queer story that kind of had a quiet romance plotline. The romance was there, but I feel like it wasn't the main focus for me. It was more so each individual character discovering themselves and learning who they are, and kind of like gaining the confidence in that basically. I feel like the characters that I cared about the most was Reza and Uncle Stephen. I also really cared for Art. I feel like Judy kind of fell away at times because she was really just kind of a connector for all of them, but she still was a really important character. So I did care a lot for all of them, and like I said, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's a very important read, and definitely a book that you should consider picking up during Pride Month or any time at all. Next is The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This is set in Spain in 1957, in Madrid in particular, and you follow a few characters, quite a few. So Daniel Matheson is the son of an oil tycoon in Texas who is coming to spend the summer in Madrid at this hotel where all these Americans are coming to tour, and he's hoping to learn more about Spain and where his mother grew up. And he also is a photographer, so he's kind of capturing it all through his camera. But he is unaware of the effects of the dictatorship of Francisco Franco that Spain is under at the present moment. But the housekeeper for their hotel room, Anna, I don't know if it's supposed to be Anna or Anna, but I'm gonna go with Anna. She knows firsthand the effects that that has, the effects that the Spanish Civil War had on her family. They're still reeling from the aftermath of that, and they're also living firsthand under this dictatorship. So I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it nearly as much as I did, but I read a book and I had like okay feelings on it. It was fine. I don't know, it's pretty good. But after that, kind of everything started happening with COVID, and I had such a hard time picking up books. I just kind of stopped reading. But then one day I picked this up on a whim. I don't know why, but I just picked it up, and I ended up getting absolutely sucked into this story, and I so was not anticipating that. There's a reason that the synopsis really focuses on the characters. It's because it has a very quiet plot. There's not that much going on in the plot, but at the same time there is, but it's kind of like all below the surface. So you don't really understand what you're reading or that you're getting the full story until the very end. You do kind of have to work for things, but I felt like the payoff made it absolutely worth it. Like there were times where I was like, why am I getting this perspective? Because there are quite a few perspectives apart from Anna and Daniel. You get like a lot of family members, but I was kind of like, why? But then I was like, I totally understand why now. Like, it's all coming together. And it exposed a lot of history to me that I didn't know. Like, so much that I was like, how could I not know about this? Mind you, I don't really know a lot about Spanish history in general. I only really know about the Spanish Civil War and stuff like that from when I went to Barcelona, but I still was like, how could I be so ignorant of something that happened fairly recently once again and was totally horrible? So once again, I was inspired to do some more research into it. But I liked the fact that this was so character focused. That was really the main part of it. You have so many characters and it focused on all of them, and it gave you a really multifaceted perspective of everything that was going on at that time. I like the fact that you had an insider perspective in terms of Anna and her family, and also an outsider's perspective with Daniel, where he doesn't really understand like why Anna's a little bit weird about some things and he's not really getting it, and you're kind of not really getting it either. You're like, why? Because it's a story that's really shrouded in secrets. It thrives on the secrets that you'll get the payoff in the end. Like, you really, really need to work for it. So it's definitely a story that you need to be patient with. I will say that even though it surprisingly did suck me in pretty early on, the ending I found very jarring. I wasn't expecting the abruptness of it, and I understood why after, but it was kind of like, wait, what? Like, I felt like things were starting to finally happen, and then I was like, and then you just leave me like, what? But that was, I feel like, the last, like, I don't know, 70 or so pages. It started to like, I was like, okay, I understand, because you kind of like take a big jump, and I don't want to really say that much more to avoid spoilers, but it did put me off for a second, but then I got it. So I think this was super well written. The characters were really easy to care for, and was also culturally so rich. It truly transported me to Madrid. I could picture everything pretty much perfectly. Like, I feel like the author just painted a perfect picture in my mind, and it reminded me why I love her so much. I'm sad this book took me so freaking long to read. Like, I had an arc of it and I just didn't read it, but I'm glad that I finally did read it, because it had a truly beautiful writing. Like, she is such a great writer, and there's just so many details to it. The writing style was so detailed. There was not a stone left unturned, at least in my opinion. Like, I'm not a historian, and like I said, I don't really know a lot about this time period, but I felt like it taught me a lot, but also gave me a great story. And I was kind of confused looking at this book at first. Like, I remember when I first got the arc, I was like, why is it so big? But once you read it, you understand why it's so big, because there's a lot that is covered in here. But overall, I thought it was an amazing historical fiction, and I'm really sad that it took me so long to read it, but I'm glad that I finally did. Next up is Slay by Brittney Morris. This is another book that it took me forever to read, but like, so glad that I finally ended up getting to it. I give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars as well. So in here we follow Kira, and she is an honors student, she's a math tutor, and she's one of the only Black kids at her school. But no one knows that she holds a little secret. So she is the developer and creator of this game that has hundreds of thousands of players worldwide that come together for this game that is Wakanda inspired, and all of these Black gamers can come together in her online game where they take on Nubian personas and battle in the world of Slay. However, once a teen is murdered over an in-game dispute, the game makes its way to mainstream media, and people start calling it all sorts of like crazy things like racist and just an exclusionist hub. And then this anonymous troll has infiltrated the game, threatening to sue for anti-white discrimination. So I listened to the audiobook for this, and it was a full cast audiobook that was really, really good. It truly brought the story to life. Like, I loved the game world. I loved everything about it, and how it just celebrated Black people and who they are, and they had this safe space where they can be together and game. And it brought up a lot of good social topics, such as like, in real life, I wish something like this existed. I wish it didn't have to exist, but I do wish something like this existed, because I know obviously racism is a huge problem like everywhere, but in gaming it also is a huge problem. Black gamers are constantly discriminated against, and this book delves into that a lot, and why they need this safe space where they can go and game and celebrate who they are. Apart from that, there were lots of other social issues that were brought up, like racial profiling, and they're brought up in interesting ways. I loved Kira as a character. She was so easy to root for, and just like having her perspective was a joy. She was just such a joyful character and very smart. There were certain other characters who didn't treat her very well, and like I really just wanted to be like, no, like get away, don't do that. And I understood why after, but she was just a well-rounded character and a strong heroine to stand behind. I also loved having Cicada's perspective. She was so fun too. Like I feel like the two of them and the relationships in here were great, and having that little bit of her perspective added a lot to the story. Also, the sister relationships, like Steph and Kira, I loved their sisterhood, and it reminded me a little bit of like my own sisters and myself, and like that kind of like love to hate sort of thing. It was just really, really sweet. Now, not only were there some multiple perspectives in here, but there also was, you had some chapters that were in the game and then some that were in real life, and I loved that you got to be in the game because it was such a well-crafted world, and learning more about this game that she created, I felt like I was learning more about Kira, and the game was so cool, and you got to see how impactful it was and how far that impact spread and how many people really cared for that game and how much it meant to them. Now, I know it's probably not like the most realistic that two teen girls would be able to run such a large-scale game, but like that suspension of disbelief that you needed didn't bug me at all. I felt like the rest of the story was so great, and I don't even really think that's a problem. Like, it's a fictional story, so it was just, you know, you have to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief. Don't let that turn you away from the story because it was amazing. This was a really layered story. The book hit a lot of different levels. It was fun, but also impactful and just really great overall. And I definitely think that if you are a Black gamer, you will really appreciate this book. And even if you're not, I think you'll really love this book. I had a lot of fun reading it. So definitely would recommend, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Can't remember if I said that yet. I totally forgot to include this next book in the thumbnail, so sorry about that, but that is Alex Approximately by Jenn Bennett. So I give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars after reading Starry Eyes, which is the book that I read before Fountains of Silence that I liked, but I didn't fall in love with. But this one, for some reason, it just clicked with me more. So in this, we follow Bailey, who's a huge classic film nerd, and she is crushing on her fellow film geek, Alex. That's the name that she knows him by online. She doesn't actually know his real name, but she does know where he lives. That sounded creepy. Not like that. So she moves in with her dad in this small California coastal town, surfing town, and she knows that that is where Alex lives. But she's kind of too afraid to tell him that she's moving there, so she decides not to, and she ends up getting this job at this little museum tourist trap thing, and she works there, and there's the security guard that she just does not get along with. He just starts teasing her for really no reason, but it's an enemies to lovers sort of thing because he is Alex. So that's in the synopsis. I am not spoiling you. I promise I am not. I did a reading vlog where I read this book, and I said that I feel like this would have been a 5 out of 5 stars if I hadn't known that, if I hadn't read the synopsis first. However, a lot of people were like, well, I don't feel like that's fair criticism because it's a You've Got Mail retelling. I've never seen You've Got Mail. I'm not a big movie person, so I haven't seen a lot of movies, and I have not seen that one, and I probably won't watch it. Honestly, I don't even think I've heard of it, but I guess like I understand where you're coming from. If like you're familiar with that story, then you know that's kind of where it's gonna go. So it was kind of like a minor annoyance for me though, because I kept on waiting to be like, when's this reveal coming? And like it took a real long time. Like I feel like it seemed super obvious, but I don't know if it just seemed obvious because I knew it was coming. Like I feel like I probably wouldn't have picked up on it if I hadn't known it was coming because I'm just not that kind of reader. I'm not thinking ahead. I'm not putting the puzzle pieces together. I'm just waiting for them to put the puzzle pieces together for me. So I don't think I would have known. So That aside, this was a really charming summer love story. For some reason, like, it just clicked with me. And I don't know if I would have given it 5 out of 5 stars because I didn't like love it. I think 4.5 is kind of the sweet spot. Like, it was really, really enjoyable, but it didn't really have that extra oomph to set it to a 5 out of 5 stars. So Porter was a very swoon-worthy book boyfriend. I feel like I haven't really read many books where I feel like that about the characters, but he was so sweet and charismatic, even though he was like being an ass to her in the beginning for like really no reason. It was really cute. It felt like one of those things where like he was just teasing her and it wasn't like mean. Like, you knew it was coming from a good place, so I didn't mind that. Now, the interesting thing is her online interactions with, what's his name, Alex. It's on the cover. So Alex/Porter, those I kind of could have done without them. Like, that's the thing. I don't feel like him being the same person added a lot to the story. And I didn't feel like those interactions really kind of like did anything. I didn't feel like they got across a romantic feeling. I didn't feel like they like gave me more of their relationship. I felt like I kind of kept on waiting to have some interactions from before so then I could understand how they had like a crush on each other. Really, the only kind of crushy thing was he would be like, oh, are you coming to visit? And that was really it. But that also like doesn't mean anything. But really, like, Porter just had a really great heart. He just seemed like he seemed like a good guy, like a sweet cinnamon roll, honestly. This was more than just a cute romance though. There was like way more tense things than I was expecting to happened, and I was like, whoa, okay. But that, like, I don't know, it was interesting because it wasn't what I expected. I liked the fact that surfing and classic movies were brought into the story. Like I said, I'm not really a big fan of movies, but I do love the fact that she gives her characters really interesting hobbies and stuff. That's a super minor thing, but I don't know. But Porter and Bailey's relationship, I think like they went from hate to love really quickly, which I didn't mind personally because I'm not really that big of a fan of hate to love because I like the hate portion doesn't really do that much for me. I'm more here for the mushy stuff, apparently. I don't know like who I've become, but I guess that's what I'm here for. So I didn't mind that it quickly went into that romantic stuff. This really just set me on kind of like an emotional roller coaster, but like the characters, I just like, they spoke to me and clicked with me very quickly, and I think that's why it worked so well for me. Also, I really liked Bailey's relationship with her dad. I thought they were really sweet, and yeah, it was a really fun summer contemporary and kind of like just what I needed at the time. It is very big, like she writes some pretty big contemporaries, but I do feel like it's kind of like Morgan Matson. They kind of remind me of each other a bit, and I didn't mind that it was so big because there was quite a bit of action in here, surprisingly. Next is Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So in this book, we follow Jack and Kate. Jack and Kate meet at this party and they bond super quickly and everything seems great, but then Kate dies. So obviously that's a problem. So Kate's death actually sends Jack back to the beginning when they met, and he has the opportunity to try and prevent her death, but obviously there's going to be some consequences for changing things. This is definitely kind of a story where you need a little bit of a suspension of disbelief because it is for the most part contemporary, but you have that time travel aspect, which I really enjoyed because I felt like it just added a twist. It was a fresh and fun twist on contemporary, which can kind of get dry and dull after a while, but this kept it really interesting. So you have Jack reliving the same time period over and over and over again, and you see the different changes that are taking place. And I liked that this wasn't just about Jack and Kate. His friends also came into it, his parents were in it, like his family unit was great, and the friend group was so great. And the story overall was super well written because it's pretty big once again for a contemporary, but all the characters kept me engaged. Like Jack in particular, I feel like was a very engrossing character. I wanted to know more about him and hear more from his perspective because it was such a fun and interesting take on things. This just wasn't the typical romance. It truly wasn't what I was expecting, and I didn't know what to expect going into it because the concept is a little bit weird. It's different, but it's a good weird and a good different. It just made it just so unique. I don't know how many different ways I can say that, but I feel like he just had a very distinctive writing voice and a very distinctive characters, and the character development with Jack and watching him grow was fantastic, and it was just a story that managed to hit, once again, so many different levels. It was lighthearted, it was fun, and it was heavy, and it was humorous and witty, and it was so many different things, but it definitely has made me want to read more from this author. He has another book coming out. I'm not sure if it comes out in 2020 or 2021, but I already added it to my Goodreads because I definitely need it. Like, his writing was so fantastic and enjoyable, and I really enjoyed it. And the final book is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and it was a pleasant surprise because I wasn't that big of a fan of their last book, but I feel like this is more what I enjoy from them. So in this book, we follow Carrie and James, and Carrie has been working for the Tripp family. The Tripp family started as this, like, they had this small home goods store in their town, and then they ended up being HGTV stars. So that's where they're at now. They're about to go on tour for their relationship advice book because everyone thinks they seem like the picture perfect, adorable couple. Now, we have James, who is an MIT engineer graduate, and he is pretty desperate for work at the moment because his past, like, employment has not been that great, so he agrees to take a job with the Tripps, and he's expecting to be their engineer working on some of the builds that they're doing, but instead he ends up being an assistant to Rusty Tripp, and Carrie is working with Melissa Tripp. So the two of them, picture perfect relationship, but not really. Rusty and Melissa are actually having a lot of trouble in their marriage. They are not getting along, and as they're about to go on book tour for a relationship book, no less, they decide that Carrie and James have to go with them so then they can keep up the appearance that they're doing fine and make sure that they're keeping them in line. Now, neither of them wants to go at all. Neither of them wants to be there, but they kind of don't have a choice, so they go, and that's the story. I feel like this is going to be a book where you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it for a lot of people, because the drama for the main couple kind of takes a backseat for the drama for the couple that they're working for. I personally really liked that. I loved watching the relationship between Carrie and James develop, especially with the backdrop of all this relationship drama as this relationship between Rusty and, what was her name? I just said it, Melissa, was falling apart. To me, that relationship drama was more interesting, and I preferred to just see kind of the peaceful, like, blossoming of this new relationship. This was super melodramatic, but it also had really great characters. I feel like obviously I love a good character because I've said that about, like, pretty much every single one of these books. I think, yeah, every single one of these books I've said that the characters were so great and distinctive, and that, I guess, is what, like, makes a 4 or 5 star book for me, is the characters, and that's not that surprising. I felt like I could picture all of these characters really well, especially Melissa and Rusty. They were just, like, such kind of ridiculous caricatures that it was so enjoyable to read about. The melodrama, everything that was happening with them, like, it was just like one thing after the other, and it just made the book a lot of fun to read as the two of them, like Carrie and James, are trying to have this relationship, trying to, like, work and get by, and then they have everything with their employers are falling apart. Like, literally their job is to keep a marriage together, which I think is really funny as they're trying to, well, not really trying to, as they end up having a relationship blossom between the two of them. It was really honestly just a cute and easy read. I felt like Carrie and James fit together very well, and I could see how they came together. It felt very natural and organic, and I just had a lot of fun with this. This was like, this is what I like from adult romances. It was just enjoyable, quick, easy read. Was it groundbreaking? No, but, like, it was a lot of fun. So those are all of the 4 or 5 star books that I've read recently. I'm going to try and film the 3 star and, well, 4 star and under. Basically, I'm just gonna put 3 star and under because it's so much easier, but I'm gonna try and film that soon so then I can be caught up and have a clean slate for recent reads and hopefully keep up with them. But But please do let me know if you have read any of these books, your thoughts on them, or if you're planning to read any. I definitely would recommend all of these, obviously, because I think they were all really great and I definitely loved them. So thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!